Kind of Brian Kilmeade off today. Judge Napolitano with you. 866-408-7669. In the same week during which a report by the Department of Homeland Security surfaced, which lumped in with race-based haters, people who are pro-life, people who are in favor of, are concerned about immigration, in favor of protecting Second Amendment rights, people who think the federal government is too big, too fat, taxes too much, regulates too much, and engages in too much activity nowhere sanctioned by the Constitution. In the same week in which President Obama releases 175 pages of memoranda from President Bush's Justice Department, in which the Justice Department purports to justify legally the most horrific physical abuse of prisoners that I've ever seen written down in the modern era. There's so much to talk about. Who better to discuss these things with than Congressman Ron Paul? Congressman Paul, welcome back to Brian and the Judge.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
You are, in addition to being a congressman, a world-class economist and a physician. How do you react when you learn? I want you to wear whichever of those hats comes naturally to you. When you learn what the government did to people under the Bush administration, that President Bush obviously lied about it, that President Obama has the courage to reveal it, but lacks the courage to prosecute the people who did it.
Yeah, it sounds like he's playing politics. He wants the political advantage of blasting Republicans. At the same time, he helps cover it up and not prosecute. So I'm not very reassured that he's going to get to the bottom of this and deliberately doesn't want to. But my initial reaction is it comes more political than it does medical, even though the medical also offends me to no end, because sometimes I even get physicians involved in some of this stuff. And, you know, when on the extreme aspect of this, when it gets as bad as it was in Germany, you know, the doctors got involved, and that to me is so bad. I really hate to even see doctors involved in dealing with death penalties and different things like that, or abortion. These things just are abhorrent. But legally, this is just outrageous, because you could argue the whole principle of what governments are supposed to do. But what about the practical argument, too? You know, if you have 100 people and you think there's one person that might have information that might save somebody's life, what you're doing is you're justifying, saying, well, we have a right and an obligation to waterboard every single one of them.
Right.
And we can be sure that a lot of innocent people were waterboarded during that time. And Christopher Hitchens, despite some of his shortcomings, I think he's the one that volunteered to do this. And he says, believe me, he says, you will tell them anything. And, of course, they do. And then that just leads to capturing more innocent people. Or there are people they don't like.
It was a hallmark of the Nazis to punish a large group because they believed that one among that group might have disobeyed them or might have information that they want. It is particularly abhorrent that we would follow that type of a procedure, but I never thought of it that way. You're right. These people haven't been adjudicated of anything. Somebody said to somebody else that they heard from somewhere else that this guy knows something. So on that basis, they're going to bang his head against a wall. They're going to practically drown him. They're going to try and torture him to death with mosquitoes inside a coffin.
See, one of the worst arguments is to say, well, and they say to the people and to many conservatives, and they are reassured. They said, well, what's wrong with this? You know, they're terrorists. Well, they're not. They're just suspects. We had a letter, and I am sure you can believe this. It was circulated by a group of conservative members of Congress and asked me to sign it, which I have no idea why they bothered asking me. And the letter was urging to make sure that none of these prisoners came into the United States. It had nothing to do with they were going to blow up the country. It had to do with if they get in this country, they might have the protection of the Constitution.
Wow.
I mean, it was so blatant. What are they thinking about?
There's so many of your colleagues, obviously not you and not the people that agree with you, but so many people in government. I was repulsed by this when I was on the bench, Congressman Paul, and you and I have discussed this in private. So many prosecutors or lawyers representing the government would spend more of their time justifying, avoiding, and evading the Constitution Constitution than simply following the lust for glory, the desire for victory, the wish for political gain, caused them to circumvent the very sheet anchor of our liberties, the supreme law of the land, as to which everybody in the government takes an oath to uphold.
Right, and thrown in with that is reinterpretation. You know, they do avoid it, and yet many times they'll say, well, the other day somebody said, yes, Ron Paul's always talking about the Constitution, the defense of the Constitution, but he doesn't have the vaguest idea of what the Constitution means.
Right.
You know, that's what they'll say, that it is our understanding. But, you know, it shouldn't be yours and mine decision to make and tell us what the Constitution says. We should be able to read it and see what it says. There shouldn't be, most of it is pretty clear.
It's pretty clear that it gives the Congress just 17 unique, discrete powers, and then it says in two of the amendments, what's not given to Congress is not there, and what's not there is reserved for the people and the states. It's pretty direct. What will the government say when they are asked where in the Constitution they get the power to fire the chairman of GM, to say to GM bondholders, you're going to surrender that bond and we're going to give you GM worthless stock instead, to say to the president of the ABC banking company, because we bought 1% of your stock, you know, we browbeat you into selling us the 1%. We threatened an audit if you didn't sell it to us, but now that we own 1% of your stock, we're going to micromanage your company. There is nowhere in the Constitution that the government can point to for that kind of authority, and yet you know that they will soon claim it.
Yes, and what they'll say is that they want to protect the general welfare, and they have this obligation. And by protecting the financial industries, they're protecting the general welfare of everybody. And then once you get involved, then you have this obligation to make sure that that money is well managed. And they lose no sleep over this. They take their oath, and they probably in their minds think that they're being very, very serious, and then they march on, and whether it's the Interstate Commerce Clause or the General Welfare Clause or the fact that we have an obligation to make the Constitution, modern. We can't live with a rigid old document that doesn't allow us to adjust for modern times. And they go to bed and sleep quite well, unfortunately, for the country.
It's even worse than that, because I remember you telling me at the time it seemed scandalous and almost incredible, but now it's accepted as a commonplace of history that, for example, when the Patriot Act was voted on in the House of Representatives, as horrific as it is, as tampering with the Constitution, the supreme law of the land as it does, you had 15 minutes to read something that I have read, and it takes me over 20 hours to read. 15 minutes. So you know that no one read it, meaning the institutional equipment of the government prevents the democracy, lowercase d, that the government is supposed to perpetuate. If the rules of the House of Representatives don't let a member of the House adequate time to read a document before he or she has to vote on it, where are we going? Is the House an oligarchy? Does the Speaker of the House of Representatives just get his or her will no matter what the members want?
Yes, and the more important the issue, the faster the legislation. Sometimes we'll debate a bill, and it might go through committee, it'll be in the public, it'll be on the floor, and they'll spend hours and hours on certain issues like we're really serious. But then it'll go, pass in the Senate, pass in the House, and then it goes to a conference. And maybe the real ugly stuff will be put in. Now, you understand, I know, that the conference is supposed to split the difference.
Right.
It was supposed to be a technical thing, the Senate wants 100, the House wants 50, so they split the difference. But now they use the conference as the vehicle for putting new stuff in. And when the conference report comes back, the most that you can have, I think, on a debate generally is about an hour, and nobody's serious about it because they've been exhausted by pretending that they're truly working this out. There was a fair amount of debate on the Patriot Act in the Senate,
right?
And the House had a debate too, and everybody had an idea. But you're absolutely right in remembering that the real bill, when it came up, was stuck on just within hours or minutes, and
Right.
nobody possibly could have read it. So I have a good general rule which has served me pretty well, and that is if I don't have the time and the ability to read it, I have